Volantis, fire outskirts. Weskel Staples ran as fast as his legs allowed him down the familiar path to his home. He kicked up dirt behind each hurried long step he took, almost sprinting as if an enraged Clicksall hen had spotted a dumb rookie trying to steal the eggs from her nest. The long rifle on his back bounced constantly. The feathers on his belt soared with the wind hitting them as he ran. His uniform was dirty, utterly uncaring that he was smearing it with mud, grass stains, and dust, and his hunter hat was held against his head with one hand, firmly pressing it to avoid losing another one. "Weskel, what happened? What got you running like that? Did a blasted blue blood cut off someone's head or something?" Weskel heard the worried but already angry voice of Mr. Warlow, one of their neighbors and a good man at heart with a burning hatred for nobles at large. It was so typical for the old, cane-wielding man to assume that a noble was responsible for any altercation or scandal. To be fair, he was right most of the time in that regard. The Clicksall hunter slowed his pace as he did a sharp turn, using his ankle as a pivot in a manner that he had learned over the years. "War!" the 19-year-old yelled, his gaze turning to the aged veteran. "Treason! Duke Draymore has launched a coup! Betrayed the prince!" he shouted in between ragged breaths, feet never stopping. After his reply, he turned his attention back to the road, only faintly hearing a cane falling to the ground, followed by a string of very unflattering words flowing out of the old man's mouth. Weskel kept running, desperate to get home as soon as possible. It took him another 3 minutes until he saw his home on the distance, a humble but beautiful residence won by his parents' hard work. It had been an almost cruel irony of the universe that their home, surrounded by lush life and so close to the forest, had brought so much pain to his big brother Wyatt. Thinking about his big brother was always bittersweet. On one hand, he was a fantastic brother. He always looked out for him and Wham. He loved his family and always did his best. But on the other, he'd seen the pain and the trauma his brother had gone through. The sleepless nights when he screamed in terror, his isolation, his refusal to socialize or interact with anyone, the mouth-breathing idiots calling him a liar, and his fear of anything plant-related. But Wyatt proved stronger, and eventually he regained his senses and strength, even if he looked diminished and fractured in his eyes, and now he was potentially in danger in a conflict that could drag him to war. "Mom! Dad! Wham!" Weskel shouted as he approached his home, slowing down as the air in his lungs burned from his long run. He was used to running long distances thanks to his job, but the run from the train station to his home was more than arduous. He was about to shout again when the front door opened, revealing his father, Wirt Staples. His father was quite lanky. His black hair already had several gray hairs. His face had several wrinkles but maintained an air of youth around himself, and his scarred, burned arms were exposed as his shirt was pulled up, clearly working on something. "Weskel, what's the matter, son?" Wirt asked, his voice gruff but amicable, his tone preoccupied. "Dirt, Dad, you inside!" Weskel cried out, his breathing ragged and spent. His muscles were burning now that he had crawled to a near halt, and his father, bless his heart, aided him inside the house. Wirt Staples guided his second son to the living room where he sat him down on the couch. Weskel wanted to speak, but he put a hand on his left shoulder. "Catch your breath first, Weskel," he commanded, and his son nodded. Then he turned to the side. "Winona! Wham! Get here! Weskel has something important to tell us!" He shouted, and a few moments later his youngest son, Juan Staples, appeared after running from their little workshop, his hands still stained with grease as he used a cloth to wipe them. Unlike Wyatt and Weskel, Wham's hair was brown, and his eyes were a beautiful yellow syrup-colored hue, just like his mother's and Weskel's. "You look like shit, Wes. What happened? The guild kicked you out or something?" Wham asked in a joking tone, always ready to prod his brother with some humor. But upon looking into his eyes, he knew something big had happened. "Shit, this is serious, isn't it?" Weskel nodded, slowly getting his breathing under control as he applied his breathing exercises. A few seconds later appeared Winona Staples, his mother. She was the same height as his father, and her hair was shoulder-length, brown like dying leaves, and her eyes as pure as the syrup the Velter trees produced. Much like his father, her age was starting to show. No gray hairs yet, but the wrinkles were there. She also had a sturdier build, especially compared to his father's, but she wasn't fat by any means, always keeping a healthy physique, though that had more to do with her medical condition. "Weskel, why were you yelling and why are you home so early?" Winona asked in a mellow, soft tone. "What's this about something important you have to tell us?" Weskel closed his eyes and controlled his breathing. He was still panting lightly, but now he could speak without choking on his own spit. "War, Mom! The Guild recalled everyone and canceled activities for 3 whole days. There's a lot of confusion spreading across the city and the planet." "War," Wirt mumbled, frowning. "Who are we at war with, Weskel?" "Ourselves," Weskel spat. "Duke Draymore of Camreem tried to do a coup during the prince's ascension." At that, his father and brother gasped while his mother covered her mouth with both hands. I don't know what's true or not, but everyone was saying that the prince escaped and is somewhere out there gathering loyalist forces. But that's not the worst part. The Third Fleet is loyal to the Duke." "Wyatt is in danger?" Wham asked, his voice barely a whisper. What happened to Wyatt, Wes?" "I don't know," Weskel replied, shaking his head. "News have been spreading across all territories, mostly at random. A lot of nobles are angry and are demanding answers from the Orontes. My guess is that the Guimores already knew about the Duke's treason." "That explains the odd movements lately," Wirt said, taking a seat next to his second son. Wham and his wife followed suit, still processing what Weskel had told them. "Late shipments, the random inspections. I thought those issues were caused by pirates." Wirt ran his right hand across his face, pinching the bridge of his nose briefly. "Not this. Never this." "Weskel, what else do you know? Is this a dispute among the nobles?" "Apparently so, though I'm not sure. Some say this is a matter for the nobles to solve. Others are chanting doomsday and that another civil war may be over us. And others say it has already begun. I don't know who is right," Weskel replied. "My poor boy," Winona muttered, eyes watering as she turned to a frame holding Wyatt's photo before he enlisted in the Royal Navy Academy. "Wirt, we have to know if our son is alive." "He was stationed in the lingering systems as a compost hauler. I doubt he even knows about this if news are reaching us only now." "You know Wyatt, Winona. If the dead man's fleet sided with Duke Draymore, then he is likely to forsake his post. Our son is loyal to the Principality," Wirt said, his voice a mixture of pride and worry. "Wyatt won't die for something he doesn't believe in." "Doesn't matter if a noble or whatever orders him to fight. He'll have to obey," Weskel added with perceptible cynicism. "He could run away like Dad said, Wes," Wham proposed. "This is why I begged you to stop him, Wirt," Winona cried out, tears threatening to fall. "Our boy has gone through too much already. Now he's up there, risking his life for no merit whatsoever. I'd rather have a breathing coward for a son than a notice telling me my oldest is dead and gone forever." Wirt and his sons couldn't argue against her and remained silent for several long moments. "What does this mean for us, though?" Wham asked nervously. "Are we going to fight?" "We first need to know what kind of war we're dealing with," Wirt replied. "If this is a matter of nobility, then we have little to worry about other than suffering from shortages of certain goods. If not, then many will be conscripted to fight or we'll see bombardments and occupation forces soon enough." He stopped to think and take a deep, calming breath. "All that is irrelevant unless we know the side house Guimore took. Loyal, traitor, or neutral." Everyone fell silent, even as Winona tried her best to wipe away the tears now streaking down her cheeks. As commoners, they knew they had no say in the decisions the noble houses above them would take. Sure, if enough of them protested against a singular topic, they could be heard, but on matters that involved the ruling of the Principality itself, they were powerless to object or voice their opinions. 2 minutes of uncomfortable silence passed in the blink of an eye until an alarm got their attention, and they turned their attention to the singular video screen that adorned the living room. They didn't use it often, and it was there mostly to receive announcements, general broadcasts, and messages. For a split second, their hearts skipped a beat, fearing the worst. It wasn't until Weskel read the description displayed that he stood up in a hurry, a smile spreading across his face. "Video transmission from Wyatt Staples. Accept or decline." the synthetic voice asked as the pinging alarm continued to ring. Accept! Accept, you blasted machine! Weskel cried out, tossing his hat to the side and setting his long rifle on the ground. There was a moment of pure darkness on the screen before a set of dots appeared, one illuminating after the other until all 8 dots were shining white. Then Wyatt Staples appeared on screen, his nervous expression changing to one of pure elation when he saw his whole family was present. Wyatt! Wham and Weskel cried out at the same time, relieved to see their big brother safe and sound. Weskel, Wham! Wyatt replied, smiling. Mom! Dad! You're all there? I thought you'd be out hunting, Wes, he asked, worry slowly replacing his happiness. Was out. Got here as fast as I could when we got the news about the coup, Wyatt. It's good to see you're alive, Weskel answered, suddenly feeling teary-eyed, but he held his emotions back. So you know about Duke Draymore's betrayal? Wyatt said before focusing his attention on his tearing, sobbing mother. Mom, don't cry. I'm fine, really. Winona shook her head slowly, smiling. I'm relieved to see my baby boy is alive. We haven't heard from you in almost a year, dear. Can't a mother worry for her children's safety? Putting that aside, Wyatt, we're all happy to see you again, son, Wirt interjected, beaming at his son. And I'm happy to see you all healthy and well, Dad, Wyatt replied, a genuine smile spreading across his lips. Hey, Wyatt, not to damper the mood or anything, but, can you afford a video call? Wham asked, now that the immediate fervor of bubbling emotions was settling down. Wyatt winced slightly at that, but nodded. Not to worry, I can easily afford it, he replied, choking a bit on the easily part. I'll be sending you a large sum of money directly to your account, Dad. Oh, son, don't be ridiculous. Seeing you alive and well is more than enough to calm our hearts, Wirt replied, smiling at his son. Save your credits. We make enough as it is. Trust me, Dad. It won't be a problem, Wyatt explained cryptically. Just humor me, okay? Put your data chit on the screen and I'll make the transference. Very well, son. If you insist, I won't object. But you must tell us how you were to get your hands on enough credits to not only afford a video call, but also send some of it to us, Wirt said, standing up and going to the screen. He produced a credit chit from his left pocket and connected it. There, ready. Wyatt made a few clicking noises, and a few seconds later he sighed tiredly, but was also relieved. During the process, Weskel looked at his brother closer and noticed some oddities. For once, he seemed to be sitting on what appeared to be a private booth. Second, he was clean, more than usual, especially for a compost hauler. He also seemed more muscular than he'd ever remembered his brother being. Finally, he noticed his uniform and his eyes widened. What the fuck? Weskel exclaimed, gaining the attention of his entire family. Wyatt, why the fuck are you wearing an officer's uniform? Just as quickly, all eyes turned to Wyatt to confirm Weskel's exclamation. It only took them a few seconds to realize that it was true. Wirt Staples took a step back as a gasp escaped his throat, and his legs trembled when he noticed the rank insignia on his son's uniform. Wyatt! You're a lieutenant? Wirt exclaimed, his voice raspy and incredulous. How? How did that happen? You're a commoner. Wyatt's cheeks burned and he scratched the back of his head, looking decidedly uncomfortable. It's a long story, everyone. Over a month ago, I happened to come across the royal yacht and more or less ensured the survival of the vessel and its occupants. I met the prince himself. He paused as his whole family went agape, but continued after a few seconds of stunned silence. The prince rewarded me by making me a lieutenant, and I joined his forces. I've been a part of his fleet ever since. But the prince! You met the prince and he rewarded you with such an honor? It was Winona Staples who made her voice known first. Does that mean you're fighting for His Majesty's right to rule? Wyatt nodded sheepishly. I am, Mom. Guess that means you're not part of the Third Fleet anymore, Wham said, still shaken by the revelation. Had I not encountered the royal yacht and learned about the coup elsewhere, I would have deserted my post. Consequences be damned. I am no traitor, Wyatt said in a reassuring tone. You better have, Wyatt. I like you a lot more alive than dead, Weskel commented, causing his brother and father to share a short-lived chuckle. So where are you now? I don't think you're anywhere near Caiston territory. Wyatt nodded as he took a deep breath. I can tell you where I am, Wes, but I can't tell you much. I was allowed to contact you and let you know I'm alive and not much else. What I can tell you is that I'm currently on the planet Matcha, capital of House Finnegan, he said, as an apologetic smile formed on his lips. Dad, mind checking your balance? Wham ran off, and his footsteps resonated throughout their home for several moments until he came back holding an old but functioning data pad. Handing it over to his father, the older man connected his data chit to it and accessed his account to check his balance. His eyes went wide once more and he collapsed, only avoiding hitting the ground when Wham caught him. Fa! 400,000 credits? Wirt exclaimed, causing his youngest son to let go of him, also in shock. His wife was flabbergasted, and Weskel sputtered on his own saliva after hearing the amount delivered. Wyatt nodded. It is the amount I was advised to send you. I wanted to send you more, but I won't take any risks. That should cover anything you may need for a time and pay for Mom's treatment in full. Send more, Weskel muttered, feeling lightheaded. He had gone from dread and fearing he might have lost his older brother to being relieved, and was now being bombarded by shocking revelation after shocking revelation. Shaking his head, he slapped himself hard enough to make him groan in pain. Definitely not dreaming, he hissed and focused his attention on Wyatt. Why do you have so much money? Who did you kill? Wyatt's expression turned somber for a moment, then shifted to murderous glee before setting into his usual calm, measured expression. I can't tell you the specifics, but I have a lot more credits with me now, and that's not all. The credits were a reward for services rendered, and I'm... Wyatt, hurry up! We have to practice one last time before tomorrow's procession. A melodious, sweet voice called, unseen on the screen, but Wyatt turned to his right and nodded. I'll be out in a minute, Cynthia. I just need to say goodbye. Wham, blushing but with a shit-eating grin spreading across his face, laughed. The revelation of his brother's wealth pushed in favor of doing some sibling mischief. Wyatt! I thought you were too much of a Clixel chick to ask any lady out. Who is she, your girlfriend Tildy? Come on, bro, don't be shy. Introduce her to us. Shut up, Wham, Wyatt countered, cheeks blushing brightly. She's my superior and my friend, all right? Have some respect, honestly, he said with a final huff. Then he smiled sincerely. It's good to see you all again. I don't know when I'll be able to call you again, but for now, stay safe, okay? House Gimor declared itself neutral, so you can rest easy. The prince and his sister Clara are doing everything within their power to avoid turning this conflict into a civil war. A good measure of relief washed over all of them after hearing Wyatt's words. Then Wyatt leaned forth, his voice hushed. I have to go now, everyone. I love you. Oh, and please don't tell Mr. Warlow or anyone else that I'm a blue blood now. Excuse me, what? Weskel asked immediately, bewildered. You're a blue blood? To be specific, the prince ennobled me to the rank of Knight Banneret. That's all I'm allowed to tell you. I'll call again once I get the chance, Wyatt said, and a second later, the call ended. Oh, Wirt mumbled, blinked twice in surprise, and then fainted where he sat. Wyatt! Noble! Knight Banner! Wham started, but fainted, joining his father's side a moment later. Wescal stared at the screen for several seconds, then leaned back on the couch, resting against it. Did Wyatt say he made a friend? He asked, before he too fainted, joining his brother and father. Only Winona Staples remained conscious, her shock slowly being replaced by a beaming expression of pure joy and pride. Stay safe, Wyatt, she said, her worries vanquished for the foreseeable future. She would have to make sure to keep Wyatt's new position in life a secret, despite how much she wanted to yell to everyone who would listen that her oldest son had been recognized by the prince himself. Who could blame her? Her son had achieved something that was beyond the dreams and imagination of most people, commoners and nobles alike. She stood up and made her way to the kitchen to prepare herbal teas with bread and goonie. She knew her husband and son's tendency to faint when overwhelmed, always ready to tend to them whenever it happened. Her smile widened, and a soft chuckle echoed in her throat as she wondered how many times her oldest had fainted so far.
Camrim, capital world of House Draymore. Alone in his office, Duke Cornelius Draymore went through several reports and other plethora of official papers that had occupied him for the majority of his day. As he read through a report detailing a recent logistical issue, he felt his mind divided between paying attention and lamenting that his son Gabriel was as staunch in his belief as ever. "How I wish you could be at my side, Gabriel," he muttered softly before signing the paper and placing it on a much smaller pile to his right. Suddenly he froze as an internal request for an audience came through from Veronica. A thought later he gave his permission, and the doors opened while he took a professional stance behind his desk. In came his beautiful daughter, Veronica Draymore, a source of both pride and sorrow in his heart. She closed the door behind her, sealing them once more, and walked up to his desk before dropping to knee in full reverence. Cornelius resisted the urge to roll his eyes at her display and merely raised a hand in dismissal. "Veronica, you need not kneel nor bow before me. You're my precious daughter." Veronica shook her head, her blonde, braided hair swaying weakly. "I may be your daughter, Lord Father, but I am but your humble hammer. I pay my respects as it is intended and right," she replied with unquestionable conviction. "If that will make you happy," the Duke said, signaling her to stand up. Of course she obeyed instantly. "What troubles you, Veronica?" "My Lord Father, I come to inform you that House Ivoli is no more. The ruinous traitors conspired against your just rulership and planned to defect. I made sure that the heads of these traitors were departed from their ungrateful shoulders, their entire bloodline destroyed and laid to waste," Veronica stated, beaming with pride. Cornelius narrowed his eyes, quickly accessing the network in the database to find who belonged to House Ivoli and its history. A fairly powerful house that focused its reputation and power on commerce, construction, and the production of basic consumer goods. Lackluster military achievements, loyal and diligent. At first glance, he failed to see why or how they could be traitors. "I trust that you have sufficient condemning evidence?" he asked, his voice somber and heavy. Veronica proudly retrieved a data chit from within the safe compartments of her armor and placed it on her father's desk with as much reverence as she could manage. The behemoth of a man took the chit and connected it to his desk terminal. He connected to it and quickly absorbed the information in it, reading through it and analyzing it. The proof was substantial. He could grant that to his daughter. House Ivoli was found performing suspicious movements within their territory. Many shipments and small vessels were gathering in the system called GUI, bordering Taigan territory, in what appeared to be an upcoming massive expedition. Not only that, but there was substantial evidence that House Ivoli was loyal to House Astor, not House Draymore. There were several confessions from captured family members who admitted to their treachery and had tried to instigate a major revolt across their territories in opposition to his claim as Lord Regent. Disconnecting from the network, Cornelius felt relief that his daughter had not acted purely on impulse alone. He had the suspicion that Felicity Sintor or Hadrian Taigan had a hand in the investigation. Veronica simply delivered the finishing merciless blow. Looking at her waiting daughter, he could see the devotion she bestowed upon him reflected in her green emerald eyes. "I must not stroke the flames of her ego too much, but I can't let her go unpraised for her deeds either," Cornelius thought, as the difficult decision was placed before him. "You've done me a great service, Veronica. You honor the hammer of Draymore with your just and measured vigilance," he praised, gifting her a fatherly smile. Veronica smiled proudly, almost shaking in happiness as she hit her chest with a fist and bowed her head ever so slightly. "Thank you, Lord Father. No treacherous fool shall stand in your way. You shall be recognized as Lord Regent, and then as the true prince the principality deserves, as it is your right." "Your faith and loyalty in our cause is inspiring, my daughter," Cornelius said, standing up. He then walked around his desk until he reached his daughter, embracing her gently. Veronica melted into the embrace, hugging him tightly. They hugged for several long, silent seconds until he spoke up. "I'm sorry, Veronica. I should have been a better father." "You are the best father in the entire principality, Dad," Veronica replied, her voice soft and tender, unlike her usual heavy and fervent tone. "Mom would stand at your side if she were to live." "Curious. Our son believes that you would spit on my grave while our daughter thinks you'd stand at my side. I know better, my Jasmine. You would be here for them, not me. Not in this situation. Not like this." Cornelius thought to himself before caressing his daughter's hair. I failed you as a father, Veronica. I failed you both. This is all I can do to compensate for it. Will you stand at my side? Veronica broke the embrace and gave her father a reassuring nod. Always, my lord father. Whatever your will is, I will carry it, no matter the consequences. And that is what I fear the most, Cornelius thought, shame filling his heart. Just then the doors unsealed and Veronica was quick to act. She turned in a blur of motion, drawing her blade and activating it alongside her armor, ready to face any enemy that may come through that door. Instead, one of his many aides entered the room in a hurry. You dare enter the same room that your Lord Regent is occupying without prior notice or warning? Veronica half-shouted, demanding an explanation. The aide fell to his knees a few meters in front of her. I am so terribly sorry, my Lord Regent, my Lady Veronica, but I acted upon your orders, my liege, he said, excusing himself before presenting a simple blue ribbon with a white dot at each end. Cornelius understood immediately and placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder, calming her down. Stand down, Veronica. He means us no danger and has carried my orders to the letter. I've been expecting this response for several days now. Veronica glared at the aide one last time before deactivating her armor and sword, sheathing it, and glancing at her father. I was not aware of such orders, Lord Father. There are dealings only concern my attention, Veronica. Do you understand? He asked. Predictably, Veronica nodded. Of course, my Lord Father. If it doesn't concern me, then that is your decision and I abide by it. What may I do for you now, my Lord Father? Return to your duties, Veronica. But next time contact me before deciding the fate of an entire house. Only I shall decide their ultimate fate. Cornelius said, as he took the ribbon from his aide, dismissing him with a wave of his hand. The aide was more than happy to obey as he rushed out of the office. Of course, Lord Father, I shall carry your orders, Veronica replied, giving her father a salute before leaving his office. Once the doors were closed and sealed, Cornelius returned to his seat and cleared his throat. Alpha Protocol, Starman, enabled. Authentication code, LGNK017BNH, codename INTI. As the final words escaped his lips, the entire room resonated as an energy field distorted the air and molecules in it, creating a true zone of silence outside the confined bubble around the Duke. His desk terminal glitched to life, sending out multiple errors and a scrambling static until the screen settled on a blue background with a singular white dot in the middle. Duke Cornelius, a synthetic voice spoke. Greetings, the Duke replied, his voice vibrating uncomfortably but nothing he couldn't endure. Is there anything I can help you with?
We should be asking that question, Cornelius. We may not have many eyes and ears in the Principality, but we are neither blind nor deaf, or mute for that matter. Our time is limited. Will you succeed?
The voice asked in a serious tone. We knew that a clean victory was unlikely, Cornelius replied nonchalantly. I have the upper hand, the numbers, the ships, and the forces necessary to uphold and honor our deal.
That's not an answer.
Cornelius closed his eyes for a moment before his expression turned stood and firm.
Your contributions have been most useful, though some of my subjects fail to see their true potential. I've lost over 50 ships already, most of them being Corvus frigates. A substantial loss, but not entirely outside our expectations. We can't send you more ships, Cornelius. You'll have to manage with the resources at your disposal. One way or another, you must be recognized as the legitimate Lord Regent, be it through guile, ruthlessness, or bloodshed, we care not. Do not fail in your task, Cornelius. The future of the Principality is within your hands.
The voice said as the screen began to distort again.
We'll be watching and waiting for your results, Cornelius.
A second later, the screen went black. Disengage Alpha Protocol, Starman, he said, and the uncomfortable bubble around him disappeared in an instant. Cornelius closed his eyes, took in a deep breath, and resumed his work. He had much more to do.
Macha, capital world of House Finnegan, Grand Palace. From the moment the planet named Macha was visible to the naked eye, Wyatt felt astonished by it. In his mind, Volantis was more beautiful, but that was the biased opinion of his homeworld, no matter how ultimately insignificant it was. Macha, on the other hand, was unlike any planet he'd seen before. There were at least a couple dozen different orbital stations around the planet, the smallest of which dwarfed Volantis's space station. Then there were the Lagrange shipyards and anchorages, where ships were produced and stationed for a myriad of reasons. But out of every technological wonder that was not the Noir Navio, seeing the orbital ring around the blue, gray, and yellow planet illuminated by the orange light of its local star was an awe-striking experience. The planet didn't have oceans. Rather, there were several large seas scattered across its surface, with plentiful mountain ranges and a wide collection of climates with crossing rivers and smaller lakes, giving the surface an exotic allure. There were everywhere near the seas, and sitting near the bases of mountain ranges, as in space a constant flow of civilian-grade ships docked and undocked from the stations, whilst shuttles did the same, towing all manner of goods. As Wyatt sat on the balcony staring up at the sky, faintly able to see the orbital ring, he felt his heart racing as the time ticked by, but his smile remained strong and vibrant. He had been able to see his family again and send them as much money as Clara had advised him to. That made him chuckle in both embarrassment and good humor. It wasn't the first time I'd fainted in front of them, but it was still rather embarrassing that they got to see me like that, Wyatt thought as he turned his gaze away from the sky and onto the scenery in front of him. The trees were lush but small. The grass, flowers, and plants that made up the immense garden of the palace were beautiful to behold, even if the grass was more orange rather than the green he was used to. Away from any major population center, the Grand Palace of House Finnegan was a veritable fortress of carved stone, metal, woods, and luxury so outrageous that he couldn't begin to fathom how much the price of the chair he was sitting on was. At the thought of his family and financial inquiries, he turned his gaze to Clara as she continued to do something in front of a mirror while Cynthia stood behind her princess. Her red armor was polished to perfection, her long blue hair lush and sparkling, while her hands ran down Clara's blonde hair as she used a brush on it. Whatever Clara was doing seemed to be important as she stared at her reflection, smiled for a few seconds, then sighed, and used her hands to massage her cheeks, cheekbones, lips, and nose for a few seconds before trying again. "Nervous?" Clara suddenly asked without looking away from the mirror. "How does she do that? Does she have the visual field of a Yikanti?" Wyatt thought before straightening his posture. Clearing his throat, he answered, "Very." "Understandable," Clara replied without her usual playful tone. She paused for a moment, smiling at the mirror for several seconds before sighing in frustration once more. "You had very little time to practice, but Cynthia assures me you won't bring me any shame." A chill ran down his spine for a second before replying, "I can only promise to do my best, Clara." "I ask for no more than that," Clara answered. "Was your video call with your family enjoyable?" Wyatt's smile returned as he nodded once. "Yes, it was enjoyable, albeit short. I was lucky enough to see them all already gathered together." "Thank you, Clara, for allowing me to see them again," he said with deep respect for the princess. "I know you must be disappointed that your reunion was short-lived, Wyatt. However, it had to be done," Clara replied. Wyatt shook his head. "Not at all. Seeing them was more than enough. I even got to see Weskel, though that was because the news about the coup reached them. I followed your advice and orders, Clara. You know more than I do. Who am I to question you? On this particular field, I won't contest your words of praise and self-flagellation, Wyatt," came the princess's reply. "Economics and the proper handling of credits is something that, sadly, almost no commoner is ever instructed on. And nobles? Most members of the nobility don't care for it as long as they have credits to use and waste on frivolous and facetious things." She paused for another moment, smiling at her reflection, and this time obtaining a more favorable result, but not the one she desired yet. "Such a shame, really. All military branches are filled with low-standing, exiled, or fallen nobles because of it, not to mention fourth, fifth, or sixth offspring and branching houses. Competition is fierce because of that, but not the desired type of competition." "What is she talking about? Blue Bloods are always trying to outdo each other because of their damnable honor, pride, ego, and dignity. Or maybe there's more to it than that," Wyatt thought with mild concern due to Clara's tone. It was cold but conveyed a certain level of sad disdain. "I'll ask Gregor, Raquel, and Nultar during our next training session." And you, Wyatt, Clara continued after a brief pause, are what can be described as fresh nobility. More so than anyone else, you must learn to handle your newfound wealth intelligently. Your desire to send your money to your family was a heartfelt but foolish decision. Do you remember what I said? Wyatt nodded. Any transfer above 500,000 credits is tracked by the Royal Banks instantly. To side with caution, 400,000 credits is a more than generous amount, especially for a commoner family, but it is not a sum that will gain the attention of the Royal Banks. Despite our current tumultuous times, Duchess Sylvia Emerald would never allow Duke Draymore to directly interfere with the communication buoys and the trading, merchant, and financial systems across the Principality. Else we would devolve into a state of pure chaos, with private assets bidding for power and a crippled economy to contend with as it happened during the previous civil wars that ravaged the Principality, Clara explained dispassionately. I am not even going to pretend I understood any of that. But I've read what happened during the past civil wars. Bloodshed, wholesale murders, the collapse of trade lanes, mass conscription, famine, diseases, entire stations and even planets succumbing to all sorts of reasons, rampant piracy, 100-fold increase in Drazen raids, and even assaults from the Arabians and the hierarchy. The fact the Principality survived at all was an achievement in on itself, Wyatt thought and suppressed a shudder. He definitely didn't want to see that become reality. Nevertheless, Wyatt nodded to let the blonde woman know he in some part shared her fears. A short call was also prudent, Cynthia spoke next. Duke Draymore's agents could be everywhere, and with House Ishtal on his side, he has at his disposal some of the best intelligence officers, spies, and communication agents the Principality has to offer. Our own agents are working tirelessly to counter the Draymore traitors infesting the Principality's networks. Regardless, we must tread carefully and not assume that we are not in harm's way. Now he truly understood the need for secrecy and the restrictions Clara imposed upon his wish to contact his family. 6 million credits would more than ensure the prosperity of his family for a couple of decades at the very least. If he were a man without morals or unquenchable greed, those credits could ensure him a lifetime of not luxury, but stability without having to work another day in his life. He never craved for much, never wanted anything above his position in life, and that hadn't changed. So what was he to do with his remaining wealth? At Clara's behest, he retained 1 million credits within his immediate account for any purchases he might desire. The rest, excluding the 4,000 credits used, had been taken by Clara in good faith and put in various places the moment they reached Matcha and they connected to the Principality's network. Her only explanation was that his money could grow in the proper places by making the right investments. The princess, bless her heart, had tried to explain to him how that worked, why it was important, and the value of the market. But I learned little to nothing. All I really learned is that those things are complicated and, somehow, important. Like that thing she said, compound interest, was it? How can credits make more credits if you don't work for them? Credits are only good to buy the things you need to survive and to save up for when you need medicine. Putting them in other places just waiting sounds so counterproductive. But she's the expert noble, and I'm still just a commoner with a noble title. All I can do is trust her. I don't see why I shouldn't, Wyatt thought to himself. Worry not, Wyatt. Every network is in a state of chaos. Your call and transaction have gone undetected. Without a proper registry of house staples, such movements are seen as done by a mere commoner. There's no reason for any Draymore traitor to search through such channels despite the signal originating from here, Cynthia explained, reassuring the black-haired man and gifting him a pleasant, friendly smile. Ah, there it is, Clara exclaimed before Wyatt could say anything. At long last, she let go of her face. Just in time, too. My brother dearest has contacted me. The procession shall begin in half an hour. Is my hair done, Cynthia? I will need 5 minutes, my princess, Cynthia replied, never stopping her work. You shall be the envy of every lady present, my princess. Flattery is not your strong point, Cynthia. Nevertheless, your pointed comment is much appreciated. More importantly, Wyatt, Clara said firmly. Yes, my princess, he replied, ready to drop to a knee at a moment's notice. After the procession is done and the party begins, remain at my side at all times. I forbid you from mingling, as it were. Clara ordered. Wyatt stared at her, watching her face and the reflection in the mirror. For a second, he could have sworn her eyes lost the spark he'd come to grow accustomed to, replaced by a cold indifference that was deeper and much more terrible than what she showed when dealing with Uriel Holkes. "Wouldn't dream of it, Clara," he replied in a more casual tone, forcing his body to relax even as his immediate instinct was to appear as submissive as possible before her. Clara blinked, and the coldness in her eyes vanished, replaced by a more neutral and serious demeanor. "I do this for your own protection, Wyatt. You do not know proper protocol. Your house is unknown and new, unestablished yet, but as Knight Banneret of House Astor, your value is immense. Many less than reputable people would do anything to gain your nascent power and influence." Wyatt frowned, now that he understood perfectly. "And use me as a pawn in their games for power, influence, and whatnot, right?" "I am relieved that you understand their end goal, Wyatt. Your instincts are sharp, but there are those who will lie to your face, cover their words with the sweetest honey, and promise you unbelievable rewards. Masters of puppeteering and deception. Lending them an ear is to invite disaster for yourself." She paused and glanced at him. "I will not allow you to suffer such a fate, Wyatt. Not to mention that's only half of what you have to worry, Wyatt," Cynthia continued, her voice serious and direct, like when they first shared a conversation. "The most formidable and dangerous foes shall be the ladies present." "What?" Wyatt asked himself, as his brain did a double-take on what he'd just heard. "How can they be more dangerous?" he blurted out. "And adequately handsome and unmarried," the princess said, putting extra emphasis on that particular word. "Knight Banneret has appeared right before their eyes. What to do? Sit back and let others make the first approach? The shame, the disgrace. No, you will be sought after, my dear Wyatt. Unmarried ladies, and perhaps those already betrothed but seeking a better prospect, shall take their chance to gain your eye, attention, and, most certainly, your carnal candor for no other reason than to place themselves as high as possible within society," Clara explained. "It wouldn't matter if you were appealing to the eye or not in any case, Wyatt. They will come, and they will attempt to use their feminine guile to get what they desire. My princess, these ladies will fight among themselves for the chance to be the one who snares our star pilot and newest Knight Banneret of your house," Cynthia added. "It is fortunate that Wyatt Staples is not a man who seeks the warmth of a lady to comfort his bodily desires." "I'm not sure if she's serious or if she's mocking me," Wyatt thought, disturbed and taken aback by the turn in the conversation. "I suppose that love is not what they desire?" he asked with sarcasm. "Privileged are those few that manage to allow love, trust, and other such sentiments to build a relationship without sacrificing their standing within their houses. In the games of political power, influences, and personal standing, such silly things as love are anathema. They will lie, they will cheat, and they will use their beauty, their sweet-sounding words, and their bodies to gain what they desire. Do not let them win, Wyatt, no matter how succulent their fruits may be," declared the princess. "I understand," Wyatt replied as a shudder coursed through his body. He wasn't ignorant of loveless marriages or arranged ones. Not everyone could be as lucky as his parents, even among commoners, after all. But the prospect of being the center of attention of so many proverbial noble ladies felt disgusting now that he had been warned of their more than likely intentions. The following minutes went on in silence until Cynthia finished brushing Clara's hair. If they were to ask him how it looked, he wouldn't be able to tell the difference. But whatever Cynthia had done seemed to please Clara. That was all he cared about, and the only thing that mattered. As they left the room, the waiting Royal Marines formed around the princess, and they began to walk. Wyatt couldn't help but examine in detail the impossibly exquisite dress Clara was wearing. It was of a soft aquamarine hue, with gold and purple trims and adornments etched into the fabric of the dress in patterns that were breathtaking in detail, and beauty depicting people dancing, birds flying, and precious orange, red, and yellow gemstones adorning her dress. A necklace of platinum graced her neck, crowned with a multicolored gemstone he had never seen before with the crest of House Astor on it. A beautiful black raven with its wings spread wide and holding 2 swords by its talons. Her arms were covered by long sleeves the same color as her dress. They stopped a few inches from her shoulders and the puffs adorning them. He had never paid attention to her before, but with the elegant and tight-fitting dress she was wearing, he noticed that Clara's breasts were quite large. Averting his gaze from her chest, he focused on the smooth, long dress that at first glance seemed restricting on her legs, but the fabric moved in accordance to her own, molding itself against her flesh to never hamper her movements, even as some of it dragged behind her across the floor. Her feet were covered by some sort of heeled shoe he'd only seen on some ladies back in Volantis. The clink-clank noise it made against the ground was both soft and demanded attention. And all of that splendor was nothing compared to her face. Her expression was beaming with a gentle, soft, warm, caring smile that would knock the air out of anyone laying their eyes upon her for the first time. Her eyes shone with an intensity that denoted she was not only royalty, but a proud member of the royal house Astor. She was the definition of breathtaking. But all Wyatt felt when he laid his eyes upon her was sadness. Now he knew what his princess had been doing in front of the mirror. Her mask was immaculate. Perfect. Had he not seen her put it on, he would have been completely fooled by it. Next to her, Cynthia walked proudly. Her lush, pristine blue hair swayed with every step she took. The only part of her usual armor that was missing was her sword, leaving her unarmed but not unprotected. When he met her, what he believed to be the crest of House Winfield was, in reality, the simplified version of their heraldic shield. But she still displayed it proudly, a blue feather held up between the index finger and the thumb of a hand. Equally beautiful in her own way, Cynthia's expression was solid, stern, and unflinching. Poor be the fool that ushered her wrath. Lastly, himself. He was wearing his armor with the addition of a right purple-colored shoulder cape with gold trims and a single red pin keeping it locked to his armor. His armor was also polished to perfection, and the stag representing his heraldic shield was displayed on his chest. He could remove it later, but for now it was necessary. Tracing his gloved fingers across his chest, his nervousness returned, but nothing he couldn't control. They walked through empty hallways with nothing but the sound of footsteps and Clara's heels for company until two Royal Marines opened a set of doors revealing the Prince, Commander Redford, Commander Juliana, and the other commanders, plus several aides and other nobles. The men wore stylish uniforms or expensive-looking formal clothes with more garments and other accessories on them than actual clothes. The women were similar, though most of those present chose to wear a formal dress. Juliana, of course, wore her uniform. When the prince saw his sister, he stopped the conversation he was having with Marchioness Amelia Finnegan. She was a tall, mature woman with sand-colored skin and several freckles adorning her cheeks. Her eyes were golden, and her hair, black as the night, was long and pristine like obsidian. Other members of her house also surrounded the prince as he broke off to greet his sister. The siblings shared a short-lived but cordial hug. They spoke in whispers that he couldn't hear, and his attention turned to Redford and Juliana, who nodded at him approvingly. The veteran wore his uniform proudly. His chest was covered by medals and other marks of recognition and accolades, similarly to the rest of the high-standing nobles who chose to wear their uniforms instead of formal attire. You can cut the tension in the air with a knife, Wyatt thought as he lazily examined the room, until he recognized Salazar Reed alongside other nobles, the brown-haired man glaring at him silently with his gray, cybernetic eyes. In the absence of his uncle, Admiral Vashakati Reed, he'd be honored to carry his house's banner instead. Damn blue blood. Your brother died because he was a stupid, glory-seeking fool. I never wished for his death, Wyatt thought, matching his glare for a moment before looking away. The wait felt eternal as nobles conversed between themselves. The prince broke his conversation with Clara a minute or so after her entry, returning to the Marchioness's side without any fanfare. A few nobles, such as George Lintar, shot nasty glances at him. Others like William Hemtroke and Lukacs Ishtal ignored him for the most part, but the disdain in their eyes was absent, so that was good at least. Most nobles only spared him a curious glance before returning to their private talks. Finally, the waiting ended when the Marchioness excused herself and stepped out of the room, wearing her expensive yellow and cream-colored dress, while her entourage followed her closely out of the room. The talks died instantly. Everyone straightened themselves and gave themselves a last-moment check to ensure everything was in order. The prince, impassive and elegant as always, only wore a longer cape and jade-colored circlet on his head that made his already imposing figure stand out more and project his potent aura to a far greater extent. He shared a glance with Cynthia, then with Clara, and finally with him, before slowly making his way out of the doors at the other end of the room. Loud trumpets rang, followed by the elegant, sharp voice of the Marchioness, announcing the entrance and arrival of the prince himself. More music and trumpets cried out, welcoming His Majesty. Behind him, several standards rose up, walking behind the prince in two files, leaving His Majesty at the center of the formation. Each banner represented a house powerful enough to be recognized by the prince as loyal to his claim and cause. Among them stood one of Redford's aides, Juliana, and the other commanders, except Lukacs, who remained behind with the other aides. While the prince walked at an evenly pace, almost lethargic, the bearers marched in unison and with near-perfect synchronization, quickly outpacing the prince until they came to an abrupt halt at the end of a short staircase leading up to 3 thrones. One was occupied by Marchioness Amelia Finnegan. The other 2, particularly the one at the center and largest of the 3, remained empty, but not for long. The banner holders turned inward, hit the ground with the blunt bottom of the pole they were holding, and then inclined them ever so slightly, so that their banners hung freely as the prince walked beneath them. The prince never broke his pace, as countless onlookers and several camera drones recorded it from every possible viable angle. As the prince walked up the stairs, flower petals and exquisite feathers fell from the ceiling, and when he sat down on the center throne, a large banner with the crest of House Astor unfurled behind him. Amazing. Pointless, yet amazing, I have to admit. So this is a royal procession? Wyatt thought. A hand landed on his shoulder and his attention turned to face a Royal Marine. If he was correct, then it was none other than Captain Milcades. Before he could ask anything, Milcades offered him the pole he had been practicing with for the last 4 days, almost without respite. He gripped it and looked up to see his banner, his heraldic shield engraved on it. The surrealness of the situation struck him in full, and he felt dizzy. Shaking his head, he gripped his pole tightly and took a deep breath, putting on his best stoic, emotionless expression. He was nervous, that much was obvious, but there was nothing he could do now about it except clench his teeth and do his best. For them. Do it for them. For Clara. For Cynthia. I won't bring them any shame. I won't let my friends down, he thought, and something within broke. He could feel it. He felt it the moment it happened. They're my friends. Huh. Wyatt Staples? You're officially insane if you think a princess and a lady of House Winfield are your friends, but that's what I feel now. Maybe they won't die. Maybe having friends won't be a waste of time anymore. Maybe, he thought deeply before the trumpets rang and Clara commenced her walk. As soon as he watched Clara advance, his heart raced against his chest, beating so loudly he was sure everyone around him could hear it. The sensation was similar to piloting a fighter, and he embraced it with wholeheartedly. In front of him stood Cynthia, and to his left, Captain Milcades and Commander Redford stood proudly, ready to perform their duty without fail. They advanced as one, the drilling of Cynthia paying off as he maintained a steady, measured march with the other 3 banner holders. It didn't take long for them to march past Clara, who was walking with such grace and perfect balance that she seemed to slide across the red and silver carpet. The buzzing of the drones mixed with the music, trumpets, and applauses from the onlookers. All of them nobles, he noticed, were like background noise compared to the beating of his heart against his ears. One small mistake could spell disaster and embarrassment for Clara's reputation and standing as a princess. He didn't care about his image, his dignity, or anything stupid like that, but he would not be the reason his princess's standing could be tarnished. He stopped in front of Cynthia at the same, and, much like the banner holders of the prince, who had retreated after the prince sat on his throne, the 4 of them turned in unison and hit the ground 3 times, waiting for Clara to come closer since she only had 4 banner holders instead of the 20 of her brother. When she neared, the four of them inclined their poles forward, their banners flowing right above the princess's head as she walked underneath them. Just like with the prince before her, flower petals and feathers rained from above when she walked up the stairs, making her way to the last remaining throne. When she sat down, a smaller banner identical to the prince's unfurled, and the onlookers went wild, clapping their hands and shouting the mottos of their houses, with that of House Astor, "Loyalty is its own reward," being the loudest of them all. Now came the most difficult step, he reminded himself. He hit the ground once and took a step back. Another strike, another step back. It had to be done in synchronization with the other banner holders, and so far no mistake had been performed. 2 more strikes, 2 more steps, and it was done. Cynthia's rigorous training had paid off. "You were stiff at the start. We had to compensate for the last moments of the march since your pace was off, and you inclined your banner 2 degrees extra." The voice of Cynthia rang inside his mind while the blue-haired woman remained still and as unbending as titanium. "All in all, you performed much better than I had feared, Wyatt. Congratulations. Now that this is over, once we return to the Noir Navio, we can continue with your physical and melee training." Oh, how joyous, Wyatt thought with dismay.